Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Reverse Mentor Lab,
where we engage with thinkers from around the world to explore how leaders of today can learn from leaders of tomorrow.
You're back with your hosts. I'm Joshua.
And I'm Jens. Today's guest is the experienced thinker Ulrike Spang Lessnow. She's a retail executive who grew up from working in the store to run global business. Hello, Ulrike. Welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Joshua. Good morning, Jens. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. Sun is shining, mood is up, so I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Yeah, it seems that the northern and southern hemispheres have switched weather patterns, but I suppose that's normal when we're dealing with change and shifting seasons and things like that, because it's overcast and cloudy here in South Africa today. But great to be here with you both.
Thank you. No, finally, everyone is happy. You know, it seems like summer has arrived. So you see society is moving out again, and yeah, we're all benefiting from the sun.
Yeah, I was out running this morning. I was like, oh, I'm not wearing a cap. Maybe I should with my hairdress. I wasn't used that the sun is out that early in the morning, but yeah, it's good to see.
Here we are. June arrived.
June arrived indeed. So Ulrike, maybe just like I mentioned, obviously this podcast is really conversational, and thanks for your time and thanks for giving us the opportunity to learn from your way of thinking and some of your ideas. So maybe before we tee up sort of the deeper discussion today, maybe tell us a bit about yourself, where you are, who you are, and maybe what inspires you as well.
Well, yeah, it's my pleasure. So my name is Ulrike. I'm 43 years old. I'm based in the Netherlands, even though I'm German. And actually, I have been growing up in the retail space. So after my school education, I went right away into an apprenticeship, becoming a businesswoman in retail trades. And ever since, I can just say I lost my heart in retail. So I worked in different industries, starting out with the sporting goods industry, then working for home furnishings, working with beauty and lifestyle goods, and then with home furnishings again. So all my professional life, now over 25 years, I've been working in retail, different functions. So as I said, I started out as a salesperson, but also very quickly I could make my way up and experiencing retail from different perspectives. So from a local, from a regional, from a national, and also from a global level. And what inspires me is retail in its totality. So it's really how to serve people. And of course, that has an internal dimension with employees, but moreover, how to win consumers. What is an attractive offer? And especially in today's world where retail is reinventing itself every day, I'm just inspired being part of just that journey and future-proofing retail businesses, if I could say so.
Yeah, and I sort of, if you, as you're listening with that, you may have guessed sort of the theme today for the listeners that are tuning in. And, you know, Ulrike, you're a retail executive and you've been right the way through the retail stack, if we can call it that, and doing research and, you know, preparing for this conversation with you. I was incredibly impressed in terms of the vast experience that you have inside of that space. So, you know, the theme for today is younger generations and the retail space. And I know that I'm definitely looking forward to learning from you about how you think about the retail space, how you've also experienced change within inside the retail space, and how in particular you think we can build retail spaces that are more connected and more for the younger generations that we are now living in the side of this world. So yeah, that's what the theme is for today's conversation. And maybe to tee up the deeper discussion and to get your mind thinking about things, I'm just going to share a quick stat around the percentage of the population, the global population that is a younger generation. So in 2019, Generation Z became the largest generation that's living on the planet with us. So from a percentage perspective, they constitute 32% of the global population. So in numbers, that's 2.47 billion people out of a global population of 7.7 billion people. And for me, when I was researching that, I was quite astounded in terms of saying that's a huge amount of people in terms of not only from a percentage, but where they sit from a global footprint perspective. So maybe using some of your retail knowledge and your understanding of people and things like that, we can jump in with the first question. It's about saying, okay, well, younger generations form a big part of the present and future customers that retailers engage with. So how do we go about understanding younger generations, and what are some of the ways that you've seen them experience the retail space?
So, where to start? So, of course, on one hand, retail is seen as a global engine in economy because we all consume. There is the everyday consumption, and this is independent of age groups or generations, if you want to say so. Think about buying food or furnishing your home or something. Of course, taste differs, but there is a basic consumption, what I call a need purchase, where you need to cover the totality of the population. And then, of course, if you are more specific, if you are behind creating want, having more those impulse purchases, of course, you need to tailor-make your offering much better to your target groups. And here, indeed, the way we consume content and not necessarily buy differs between the different generations. So, of course, especially through Corona, you have seen that the online picked up quite rapidly. But of course, the younger generations, we see more into social media and social commerce, and the way getting to a purchase is quite different. So you look to an Instagram story, for example, and then you want to have a shop function and you want to buy it directly. Where else an elderly generation maybe also buys online, but they would rather visit a website or browse different tests, and then they decide, and maybe they use a Google machine or Amazon or price comparison machine to come to the point of I want to buy there and there. So the journey might be quite different. And I think that retail especially is something that is very open to all. But of course, in the past years, it has been speeding up, creating more content and experiences. Where in the past, the old school way of shopping was very much about, oh, I need something. I find a space where I can pick it up, whether physical or digital. And today, of course, people are seeking experiences, wanting to have curated content. So meaning for the retailers, you need to do a much better job to stay relevant. And as everything is connected in the global market space, you need to make your utmost to be the unique address people want to go to.
I would like to double click on a couple of thoughts and as well connect that to your story. So starting in retail as a young person, and we have one thing in common, we both started very, very early working. And straight away, not going a long time to school, and then with like 25 starting to work, we started a little bit earlier, let's say it like this. So starting as a young thinker in the retail space, how was that, and how did you experience the change over time when you, let's say, grow up in retail, and then you have been the senior, or now you are the experienced thinker in the retail space? How did you see these things changing?
So first, I have to say that retail is a fantastic playground also for young people to start out and to start their career. Usually, it's a very fast-changing business. And of course, as most of the spaces are still physical, retailers are longing for brilliant and service-oriented minds all over the world. So imagine all those billions of physical doors that need to have stuff catering for their customers. So as retail is so fast moving, and with that comes also often a high staff turnover, retailers usually have a high demand on skilled staff. So if you start out in retail business, as I had, it's usually that you get quite a lot of responsibility at a very young age, or even, let's say, if you start out, because you need to take care, if it is of visual merchandising, the customer satisfaction, the stock, how much products we have. So it's a quite diverse portfolio you're working with. So it's usually very attractive for doers, for people that want to move something. And as I said, as retail, many companies, let's say the big retail chains, have a lot of stores. Usually in retail, the first leaders or the first levels of leaders are quite young. So it's a great opportunity if you want also to take leadership experience or responsibility to choose the retail space to make your career.
How was that for you? Because I know you a little bit, and you mentioned it once that you took a leadership role fairly early on, and you have been the youngest, if I remember right. How was that being the young thinker, but being responsible for like senior people inside the business? How was that?
Yeah, that was not so easy. So of course I needed to learn my lessons, and sometimes even the hard way. So when I started out after my apprenticeship, I was 18, and then I started, and of course people have seen, Ulrike, there's the fresh baked businesswoman, of course you start out, but my employer at that time has seen and given a bet on me, saying there is a very engaged young woman that seeks responsibility and is just flying through the roof. So two things came together. I was highly motivated. I really enjoyed the retail space and the sporting goods industry. And at the same time, my employer was on search for professionals taking leadership roles. So that's why maybe it was an experiment for them, because at that time, it was also very male dominated. So it was not common having women then in a large scale in leadership positions. And then on top, I was a very young woman. So they probably thought, okay, putting her in a development program, giving her the first chances, yeah, what should go wrong? So my first step was as a deputy store manager. And then, of course, you get your responsibility, but probably first you take the more administrative things, taking care of the stock, taking care of the staff schedule, whatever it is, but you do not really lead. And at that time, the employees probably rather went to the store manager if they had a point than to me, the deputy. To the deputy, you walk when you have something where you want to get around. It's like when kids play with mom and dad, mom said, no, I go to dad, or the other way around. So, and then I think things changed when I became the store manager, because then you are the person that needs to take care. And I think in my first steps, I did it quite intuitive. I had no real tools how to be a really good leader. So maybe I was more the friend. I tried to please everyone and make it right. So I was working day and night. I was never taking a day off, and I wanted to please everyone. And of course, if you do that for a while, you need to recognize that it's not the way forward. You need to work on your leadership as well. And that comes through situations, having the first conflicts, needing to say no. You grow through those situations. And very different it then became, because quite quickly after, as I did a very good job, I became an area manager. And then it was where I really felt it the first time, as all the store managers, men, at that time could have been my fathers. So then, of course, I always felt I need to work even harder to convince them and win them over. That's still a good deal working together. And I think my recipe that I developed at that time, and that also describes me as a leader today, is working alongside people, empowering them, making people strong, let them grow, put yourself behind, and rather, acknowledging and fostering a team. And that was something that, went well and actually made me doing my way, or the career ladder, if you want to say so.
If we swap that around, how is it then being the senior and working with young people? How do you see that? How do you experience that today?
Sometimes I think I have not really, if I'm really honest, recognized that I have been growing up as well. Of course, I know over 40, oh my God, but I was, until 35, I was always the youngest. So even though I had large responsibility jobs on local, on national, on global level, I was still always the youngest. And then it just happened that, it was in a cosmetic studio where the service person said to me, oh, you have such great skin for a woman your age, and then I recognized for the first time to say, oh my God, something happened, Ulrike. So it's just what I want to say. It's not so easy sometimes to really tell yourself, now you're the experienced thinker, because I'm still learning every day. and there is so much where I know I know I don't know, and where I always had naturally fostered diverse teams and diversity of thought, and of course to me it comes very natural, bringing people together, bridging different opinions, if young, if old, it doesn't matter, getting things done together, jointly moving forward. So that's so natural to me that it is difficult to consciously say, no, I'm talking to young as an experienced thinker. But of course, I enjoy being surrounded by younger minds, but it can also be people young at heart that are forward looking. So I get easily annoyed by people that are always looking backwards, that are really locked into the past, that are just talking about, oh, in the past, everything has been better. Oh my God, everything is worse. We will all die. There's negativity. And that usually this hope and being more free, you usually find that among younger people, because let's say it like I was, you're a little bit more naive. And by that, you allow yourself a wider context.
Yeah, Ulrike, and I love sort of some of the things that you raised inside of the story that you just told in terms of your progression right the way through the retail experience and right the way through the different forms of management and leadership roles inside of that space. And something that I'm just going to double back on is where you said retail is a playground. And I think that potentially, looking in from an outside and sort of hearing your story in more depth and detail now is maybe something that taught you to connect with people at all of the different levels inside of a management structure is because you actually walked that journey with them. And yes, you were given opportunities, but at the same time, you also knew what they were experiencing. So essentially, you'd walk the road that they were also walking as well. And then that gave you a better possibility and better opportunities to connect with them as a leader when you did get to that executive standpoint.
Yeah, it's this empathy, I think that it helped me, of course, also in high level management positions, that I really knew how it is to work on the basis to get those things done. So you value the work that is happening differently than if I would have just learned it at school, on a theoretical level. Then you sometimes have ideas how things should work, but in reality, they would never work, So I think it's important to have one step strongly in the everyday work, and another step that I needed to learn and also develop on a more strategic part, because it takes more than just the idea or some enthusiasm to really future-proof and make a business sustainable. But I think it truly helps having made that journey myself, and it supports the empathy, knowing where people are. But it is also, a strong motivation that I want to do the same that others have invested in me into the younger generation. So helping people to raise, helping people to shine, whatever their position might be. So it does not necessarily need to be a steep career, it's just making people strong.
Yeah, and I love sort of how we've been discussing about connecting with people and, understanding the needs, dreams, and desires of people from a management structure in terms of your personal experience. But maybe if we flip it around slightly and we say retail spaces have changed. And we started off the conversation with saying about the percentage of the world population that the Generation Z fulfill and form. But how, as an executive and as someone who's passionate about retail, did you go about thinking about and connecting with younger generations who are coming in to utilize or make use of that retail space?
So I think it's very important. For example, when I guided a big project developing a new retail format, we made really sure that we do not have internal people, let's say, the same idea. We especially brought in users, so people that will be using this new concept, but also external views from retail futurists, etc. So to get a broad representation when you start exploring, but also later on when you prototype. So it's very important, let's say, because that kind of format should have been a future-proof format. So of course, a rather young target group was targeted. So of course, within that exploration space, we made already sure to have a large representation of those kind of users. And I think still in many retail companies, as retail is a nice space, I'm also in the retail space, people usually don't go away, and you need to see that you have a good balance. So not that you say my overhead, my senior management is old, but my workforce is young. That might lead to a situation where your strategic direction is not balanced. So you need to make sure, even when you strategize, that you have a representation of your workforce and of your users. So, and that meaning you need to go for strong diversity also in your management teams. And that might be age, that might be diversity of thought, that may be different orientations, you name it. But don't allow yourself that you say in the management, in the board, we only have, of course should not be, and mostly it is not, but let's say we only have people that use physical retail and that understand retail like in the 90s, where today's reality is totally different, as you said, formed by Generation Z and others that really shop in a way that they would not even say it's shopping. You know, they consume content, they get attracted with something, they follow someone, they even themselves become brands and maybe retailers, not even knowing that. So you need to understand what is going on in today's world and how is that evolving. And in order to do so, it's very smart to connect with the younger generation that makes already such a big part of the population, as you said.
If we look into sustainability, so a lot of young people, for them, sustainability is like very, very, very important. It's like a no-brainer. Yeah. If you look then into very large corporations, it's not, let's say it's not in everyone's mind yet. How do you see that from an engagement, specifically getting young people attracted into retail? So sustainability as a factor and as a driver of engagement between different generations as well. How do you see that playing out?
I think it's a major opportunity, but it's also a necessity on one hand side. So I would span it over the big umbrella of values. So people want to know, whom do I work for? So if I want to be an attractive employer, but also if I want to buy something, from whom do I buy it? What do I make myself part of? So I want to know what a company stands for. I want to have the transparency to understand what is behind the curtains. So, and here you start with business ethics. You know, do you do the right things? Do you tax all your income? That is one part. And of course, the growing importance lies, as you said, Jens, in the part of sustainability. So where do you source your goods from? What are the working conditions? What kind of material do you use? How is the material sourced? Do you take care? Do you use green energy? And what do you do for the community? So it's a much wider question. And of course, this is, and surely very soon will become the first question in mind. You know, can I trust you? Are you doing good? And those whole planet and people approach, you need to have on your radar. Otherwise, you are just out of the game. And you see the big corporations, doing big commitments. And of course, now they need to walk the way. But by that, they setting a new norm, a new standard that others are asked to follow. So if you want to be attractive for future talent, and even today there is a high fight of talent, you need to have good business ethics. You need to have your values part right. And also for the consumers, of course, for some, it's still the price being the main price point. And of course, it depends, or the main decision point. It depends on the category. But soon it will be the first question about who are you and what do you stand for?
Yeah, and I think, Ulrike, maybe just doubling down on something that you mentioned there about, you know, being who are you and what do you stand for. And I think over the last 12 months, the world's been dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic that we've been dealing, and the retail space has changed significantly. But I think, you know, as humans, sometimes I think we only remember things in the recent term. And I think something that I'm keen to get your view on is, like you mentioned, you've been involved in the retail space for over 20 years. And what are some of the other experiences and changes that you've experienced inside of that space that you've maybe learned or had to adapt the retail space to and for?
So the most was probably the shift from physical only to a totally omni-channel, multi-channel, ever connected commerce space. So the lines get so blurry, you know, we get attracted by an Instagram story. We might go into an app, or we might visit a website. We visit the physical event, and then someone will decide to choose from a certain company. So that was the biggest shift, that in the beginning, when online started off, many companies have said, that's a trend that will go away. And still, of course, today it's around 30% of global commerce that is generated online. So it's not a small trend anymore. And depending on different markets, it's even higher. Think about China. That was something that had a major impact on retail. You know, and then there was when it catched up, still many companies said, I will not step into that. It's just too expensive. Because then big retailers as Amazon or Zalando started to deliver for free. The traditional retail was really challenged to say, how should we ever subsidize that? It's so much, and handling all the returns, etc. So there was a huge organizational question around how to handle it. But then more and more it was clear it's a new expected standards from consumers. So there is no way that you get around it. And today you see it's ever evolving. So if you think how important live commerce is, in the past that would have been TV shopping or home shopping, if some of the listeners still remember. But today it's just live commerce. And whether it's by influencers or ordinary people that just recommend things, or it's companies that host certain events. So that is something that becomes ever important. And of course, then you need to understand what is then the role of my physical retail. And here is where many retailers are still a little bit behind. It's not just a place of purchase or handing over goods. This is where you should play your brand story. This is where you should really excite and give extra value, as in this human interaction and human connection can never be bet in a digital environment. So here's something where it's now the next big batch where retailing is reinventing itself in the physical space as well as in the digital space, which is now the hygiene factor that you just have to have it. I don't know if you have heard about the word of retailtainment. So it's entertaining people. It's the true engagement and connecting. And here, coming back to the different generations, of course, you attract 20 years or 15 years old people differently than a 60-year-old or 70-year-old person.
Love that. I would like to double click on that. So how do you see this playing out going forward? Specifically, if we take the Gen Z in focus and the engagement between the different generations with this new way of entertainment inside the retail perspective.
Yeah. So first thing is, as a brand, you always need to be on all channels, full flash. You know, you can't say, oh, I'm just on Facebook. I'm just there. I make a video once a month. You have to be out there 24/7 with appealing and diverse content. And then, of course, if you're saying the physical space, if we just zoom in on that, that will become probably much more local again. So you might have smaller formats, closer to communities in the neighborhoods. But the excitement within that, think about those pop-ups, those events where you have limited editions, limited experiences, like here's a bookstore you read, the next evening is a party in a certain space, or community is doing something together where a retailer chips in. So the whole way we come together and delivering our offer will be different. But that might be so those out-of-town boxes only, for example, or small mom and pop shop only, that will probably go away. The lines get blurry, and maybe we need to think a little bit more interim, so not made forever. So popping up, here I am, I make a story, then I go forward. So meaning, as a retailer, you need to have your finger on the pulse. You need to have that creativity and also the willingness to reinvent yourself every day to stay relevant.
And I really loved what you said there, Ulrike, about staying relevant, and the example that you used about not permanent inside of that space. And I think there's a great lesson that we can take from technology and how people use technology in terms of how they can also engage with the retail space going forward. So one example might be how Slack as a platform that many of the listeners may use, and I'm sure all of us on the call have used, is Slack are now changing the way that and the communication forms that they offer inside of the platform themselves, because they've recognized that people can communicate in ways that are non-permanent inside of that space. But that's another rabbit hole that I'm not going to take us down today, because we could easily spend a lot of time talking about that. But Ulrike, I want to circle back to something, in sort of looking to draw this conversation to a conclusion, and really talking around a point that you've raised, not directly in this conversation, but in another conversation that I've heard you speak at, is around human capital. And how you sort of brought that into the conversation today was you referred to how organizations need to be conscious about the different generations inside of their management structures, and how they can use different generations to maybe take better decisions and things like that. And the question that I would like to ask you is around, how can organizations use younger generations and younger generational thinking to make better decisions about the retail space going forward?
Yeah, I think it's involvement, making space. So first, of course, if you run a business, you need to be conscious about this decision. You need to make the conscious decision to say, I want to have a broad representation. And every business has everyone in their human capital. I'm sure, everyone has a broad representation, from younger to older people, etc. So if you're going to strategize, for example, make sure, let's say, if you do it in a workshop format, that you bring in people from different parts of your value chain, different age groups, different experience, different backgrounds, to really come together and to say, how do you understand our company? How do you understand our offer? And then put yourself in different shoes to say, as a customer, what would I expect? As a consumer, even more far away, how could I be heard or reached? And then you say, coming back in our shoes as a company, what would we need to deliver to be relevant and unique out there? And by raising those questions and not even giving everyone a voice, later on you need to act on it, I'm sure you will come to much better solutions. But coming back to it, I'm really a strong believer of this human capital. You need to utilize all your strengths. There is no way around. No one would do that just looking on one piece of a pie, if it is just in front of you. So opening up.
Love it. It's amazing. I would like to use that to go into the last part, which is laying out a challenge and a request from your side into the world. What is the one thing that you would like people to take away from this conversation, and as well from a broader perspective of young people, young thinkers, experienced thinkers working with retail?
So first is, I can just make advertisement and invite everyone to join the retail space. It's a fantastic place to be. It's, as I said before, it's fast paced. It has a broad field of responsibility. And usually young minds are absolutely needed to shape companies and future-proof their businesses. So great starting point for sure. And then actually, I have two things in mind that I took with me that have been brought up by a colleague long while ago, but that inspire me. It's two questions that inspire me all the time, thinking from different perspectives when it's come to the retail space. And hopefully this is something saying listeners can take with them and make their own thoughts. So question number one is, what is shopping beyond retail? Right? Is it only needed to shop in retail, or can I shop elsewhere? What is shopping beyond retail? Question number one looks from it from a different perspective. What is retail beyond shopping? And that is something that, especially now for leaders in the retail space, is a very important question. What is retail beyond shopping? What else do we need to deliver? If it is experiential places, if it is spaces for communities, if it is extra value for individuals where people can learn and build on each other. So what else? What is retail beyond shopping? So I hope that the listeners take those two questions, get inspired. And if it happens that they work already in the retail space, make your own thoughts, approach your leadership, design your space, and creating better experiences for customers and consumers out there.
Love it. It's really thought-provoking for myself, and I'm sure for a lot of listeners or people who are watching the video as well. Ulrike, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you on our podcast, and it's really great to see that you grow up in a way with topics we're talking about today, which we are passionate about as well, in getting into the way of thinking. How do you work with this reverse mentorship perspective, where experienced leaders are working with young leaders and it's kind of learning from each other? And it feels a bit like it's kind of your life, yeah. what we are trying to promote. So thank you very much for being on the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for the platform. It was a joy to have this conversation with you. And I hope that many that don't know yet how to reach the younger generation will seek out and look for you, the XYZ playground, to get in touch with the younger minds that help you and hopefully provoke broader perspectives. Thank you so much, Jotja and Jens.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening and for joining us on the journey that is the Reverse Mentor Lab. If any of the topics that we've discussed today interest you, or you'd like to connect with our guests, please feel free to reach out to us. You're also welcome to set up a free 15-minute coffee chat with Jens or myself. If you're looking for our emails, check out the show notes or the podcast description. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.